Sometimes heroes don't arrive with sirens blaring or capes flying. Sometimes they come on four legs, guided by instinct, loyalty, and a bond that defies reason. That winter in Aspen Ridge, the snow fell heavy and soundless, blanketing every road in silence. But beneath that stillness, something unthinkable was happening. A police officer and a little girl were chained deep in the forest, forgotten by the world. Miles away, a K-9 unit suddenly stopped mid-training, its ears twitching to a sound only it could hear, a faint voice, a child's whisper carried through the storm. No one believed it was real until the dog broke formation and ran straight into the blizzard. Before we continue, thank you for supporting stories that remind the world that courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it listens and answers. Make sure you're subscribed and the bell's on, because this story might just change how you see loyalty forever. The winter sky over Aspen Ridge, Montana, hung low and heavy like an old bruise. For 3 relentless days, snow had fallen in thick, whispering waves, cloaking the small mountain town in white silence. The wind howled through the pine ridges, carrying with it the faint metallic creak of power lines and the mournful sighs of the forest. The townsfolk had shuttered their windows, gathered close to their fires, and prayed the storm would pass before the next dawn. But 20 miles north, where the mountains steepened and civilization disappeared into frost, the storm was only beginning to reveal its cruel design. The Frost Valley training range was nothing but an endless field of snow, edged by skeletal trees and ghostly light. It was the chosen site for the Aspen Ridge K-9 unit's winter drills, a place where cold could strip a man of pride and test a dog's endurance to its limits. On that morning, 6 handlers trudged through the deep snow, their breath forming pale clouds in the biting air. At their head walked Rachel Vance, a woman whose presence commanded quiet respect. Rachel, 32, was not tall, perhaps 5'7", but she carried herself like someone taller. Her hair, the color of brown oak touched by winter sun, was braided tightly down her back, and her brown eyes seemed to see farther than most. She had the lean, deliberate grace of a soldier, yet something gentle hid beneath that armor. Years ago, she had been an animal behaviorist before joining law enforcement. It was the sudden loss of her younger brother, a wildlife rescuer who froze to death during a snowstorm rescue, that hardened her resolve to never let a life, human or animal, be lost to negligence again. That grief had etched discipline into her bones. Behind her padded 6 K-9s, each guided by their handlers, noses low, tails cutting the mist. They were a symphony of motion, black and tan streaks against the white, but one stood apart. The largest of them, a German shepherd named Valor, moved with the calm precision of a creature born for command. His fur gleamed in shades of sable and gold beneath the thin sunlight, and the faint silver scar over his left eye gave him a haunted nobility. 8 years old, once a decorated military K-9, Valor had seen more than most men. His last handler had died in an explosion overseas. Since then, Valor had been restless, obedient, efficient, but hollow-eyed. Rachel had worked with him for months, earning his trust with patience, never forcing commands, never raising her voice. She often said to new recruits, "Valor doesn't respond to orders. He responds to purpose." That morning, the dogs were running a GPS tracking exercise. Rachel held her handheld scanner, checking the blips on the frozen screen as gusts of snow lashed her cheeks. "Keep formation," she called out. "North ridge, then loop back to base." Her breath was visible in the air, but halfway through the route, Valor stopped. It was sudden, sharp, like a signal cut through static. His body went still, ears pricked, tail stiff. Rachel's boots crunched in the snow as she turned. "Valor," she called, voice muffled by the wind. The dog's head tilted slightly, nose lifting. Then came the faintest sound, so fragile it might have been imagination. A voice. A child's voice. "Please, help us." Rachel froze. The wind hissed between the trees, and for a moment it seemed to carry the whisper again, thin, pleading, trembling. The other handlers exchanged uncertain glances. "Ma'am," one of them muttered, "probably just whined through the valley." But before he finished, Valor moved. Without hesitation, the dog bolted through the snow, his paws tearing through the drifts, his form swallowed by the swirling white. Rachel shouted, "Valor, stop!" Her voice broke against the gale. The other handlers tried to follow, but the snow was knee-deep and the wind relentless. Within seconds, Valor vanished between the trees. Rachel cursed under her breath. "Damn it, get the ATVs. We follow his trail before we lose him." It took them nearly 30 minutes to reach the tree line, tracing the fresh paw prints that cut through the storm. The further they went, the quieter the forest became, as though the wind itself held its breath. Then one of the handlers raised a gloved hand. "Ma'am, over there." At first, Rachel thought it was another fallen branch. Then she saw the shape, the dark outline of a man slumped against a pine trunk. As they drew closer, her heart clenched. He was wearing a dark navy police uniform, torn and stiff with frost. His wrists were chained behind the trunk with a heavy iron link. His head drooped forward. The man's face was pale, lips cracked, beard rimed with ice. His name tag, half buried in snow, read Cole. "Officer down!" Rachel shouted, rushing forward. This was Officer Ethan Cole, 35, a member of the Aspen Ridge Police Department. Once a soldier in the Marines, Ethan had joined local law enforcement seeking a quieter life. He was the kind of man who spoke little, worked hard, and carried a quiet melancholy that only those who'd seen war could understand. Beneath his calm exterior was a heart heavy with guilt. His younger partner had died in a crossfire 2 years ago, and Ethan had never forgiven himself. He had thrown himself into work, volunteering for shifts no one wanted, patrolling through nights others avoided. Rachel dropped to her knees beside him, her breath quick and uneven. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. A faint pulse. "He's alive," she cried. Relief surged through the team. Then she noticed movement, a small shape beside him. She turned her flashlight and gasped. A little girl, no older than Adit, was lying half buried in snow, her hands tied with frayed rope. Her hair was tangled, brown curls matted against her face. She wore a torn pink sweater, a thin gray skirt, and shoes, far too small for the cold. Her lips were blue, but her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Rachel's voice softened. "Oh, sweetheart." She quickly cut the ropes, wrapping her own scarf around the child's trembling shoulders. Valor stood nearby, watching them. The big dog sat upright, Snow clinging to his fur, eyes bright with fierce awareness. He let out one short, deliberate bark, like punctuation. Rachel met his gaze, understanding dawning. "You led us here," she whispered. "You heard her." Ethan stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes a deep, weary gray. "Lily," he rasped, his voice brittle as dry leaves. "Save the girl." "Don't talk," Rachel said firmly. "You're safe now." But even as she spoke, a sound cracked through the stillness, a sharp snap of a branch. She spun around, flashlight slicing the dark. Something, or someone, was out there. A silhouette moved between the trees, swift and deliberate. A tall figure wearing a black mask and winter jacket, blending almost perfectly into the storm. The glint of metal flashed at his side before he vanished into the white. Rachel rose to her feet, gun drawn. "Show yourself," she barked. The forest gave no answer, only the hiss of wind and snow. One of the younger officers, breathing hard, pointed to the ground. "Ma'am, look." In the fresh snow near where the figure had been stood a distinct boot print, deep, clean, professional. Rachel crouched down, shining her light over it. The tread was unique, angled, reinforced, and military grade. But what caught her attention was the emblem stamped faintly into the sole, a lightning bolt insignia. Her stomach twisted. That was no random criminal. That was police-issued tactical gear, used only by special enforcement units. She rose slowly, lowering her gun. Around her the snow fell thicker, muffling sound and sense alike. Ethan had slipped into unconsciousness again, the little girl now cradled in an officer's arms. Rachel's gloved hand rested on Valor's neck. The dog didn't move, his body rigid, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the trees. The wind swelled, shaking the branches above them. For a moment, Rachel thought she saw another flicker of movement, something watching them from the ridge, motionless, patient. She whispered, almost to herself, "We're not alone out here." Valor gave a low growl, deep and steady, the kind that came not from fear, but from recognition. His golden eyes glowed against the storm's pale fury. As the blizzard rose again, swallowing the clearing in white, the world seemed to hold its breath. And in that breath, between one heartbeat and the next, every instinct Rachel had screamed the same thing Valor already knew. Something in the dark was watching them. The wind howled, snow spiraled, and Valor stepped forward, positioning himself between the unconscious officer, the girl, and the trees. His breath steamed in the air, his stance unyielding. Above them, the sky broke open in a new surge of snow, erasing tracks, covering evidence, swallowing truth. Somewhere out in the storm, the masked figure turned back once, then vanished into the forest. 3 days had passed since the storm swallowed Aspen Ridge, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the snow itself. The hospital sat on the edge of town, a modest building of pale stone and glass that reflected the soft light of the thawing world. The air smelled of antiseptic and pine resin drifting from the woods beyond. In room 204, the steady beep of a monitor marked the fragile rhythm of survival. Ethan Cole opened his eyes to a ceiling washed in sterile white. His body ached as if the cold still lived inside his bones. For a moment, he couldn't tell if he was still out there, chained, forgotten, surrounded by snow and silence. But then he heard it, the faint huff of a familiar breath. Turning his head slowly, he saw Valor lying near the bed, one paw stretched forward, amber eyes half open but vigilant, as if guarding him from ghosts. The door opened with a hiss. Rachel Vance stepped in, her uniform crisp, her braid loose around her shoulder from long hours without rest. She carried a thermos of coffee in one hand and a thick file in the other. "You're a stubborn man, Officer Cole," she said softly, a faint smile breaking the line of exhaustion across her face. "Most people would have given up out there." Ethan's voice was hoarse. "Most people didn't have him." He nodded toward the dog. Valor's ears twitched at his name, but he didn't move. Rachel placed the file on the small bedside table and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You were out there for almost 48 hours. When we found you, your pulse was fading. The little girl, Lily, she was barely conscious. She keeps asking if you're okay." Ethan frowned. "She's safe." "Safe," Rachel confirmed. "Resting 2 rooms down. The doctors say she'll recover, though." Her voice lowered. "She hasn't said much. Just hums a song sometimes." That song. Ethan remembered the faint melody in the storm, the sound that had guided Valor. "She was singing when he found us," he murmured. Rachel tilted her head. "He heard her through the storm. I didn't even know that was possible." "It's not," Ethan said, staring at the ceiling, "unless something told him to listen." Before Rachel could answer, the door creaked open again. Dr. Samuel Hartley, the attending physician, entered, a man in his early 50s, tall and lean with graying hair at the temples. His voice carried the practiced calm of someone who'd seen too many near deaths to believe in miracles, but still hoped for them. "Glad to see you awake, Officer Cole. You had us worried." He adjusted the IV drip and checked the monitor. "No frostbite severe enough to cost anything permanent, but your lungs took a beating. You'll need rest." Ethan nodded, but his mind wasn't on his injuries. "Has anyone told the sheriff?" Rachel's expression flickered, almost imperceptibly. "He knows," she said. "Sheriff Dalton sent word to suspend the North Sector patrols until further notice. He's grateful you're alive." Ethan caught the hesitation in her tone. "Grateful?" he repeated quietly. "Right." Later that afternoon, when the doctors finally left, Rachel returned with something in her hands. A small black device covered in frost stains, Valor's K9 body camera. She set it gently on the bedside tray. "We managed to recover the footage." Ethan straightened slowly, pain flaring through his ribs. "Show me." Rachel connected the device to a laptop. The grainy video flickered to life, showing Valor's point of view. Snow whipping in every direction, paws pounding, the occasional flash of trees. Then came a faint voice, a child's whisper, almost lost to the wind. "Please, help us." Valor's head jerked toward the sound, and the camera swayed violently as he ran. The image blurred, then steadied on 2 figures half buried in snow, Ethan and the girl. But what came next made Ethan's blood run cold. In the corner of the frame, partially obscured by snow and darkness, stood a man in a dark jacket with a badge on his shoulder. The silver shape of a lightning bolt insignia gleamed faintly as he turned away, holding a key ring that glinted under the flashlight. Then the screen cut to static. Rachel froze the frame. "You see it, don't you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "That symbol. It's standard issue for Dalton's Special Enforcement Unit. Only 5 of them have it." Rachel exhaled slowly. "Meaning whoever chained you up wasn't some random criminal. It was one of ours." Before they could speak further, a knock came at the door. A woman entered, mid-40s, auburn hair tied back, her face drawn with sleepless worry. This was Deputy Nora Green, one of the longest-serving officers in Aspen Ridge. Short and compact, with quick eyes and a voice that rarely rose above a calm monotone, she was known for her blunt honesty and deep sense of duty. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "Rachel, the sheriff's looking for you. Says he wants your report in person." Rachel frowned. "Now?" "Now," Nora confirmed. She looked at Ethan briefly. "Good to see you breathing, Cole. Half the town thought we'd lost you." There was sincerity in her tone, but her eyes darted to the camera device with unease. She hesitated before leaving. When Rachel left, the room felt colder. Ethan sat in silence, watching the snow melt outside the window. Valor shifted, resting his head on Ethan's knee. "You found me when no one else would," Ethan whispered. "Guess that makes us both hard to kill." A soft knock interrupted the quiet. This time it was Lily Evans, the little girl wrapped in a hospital blanket, her pink sweater replaced with a white robe. Too large for her. Her brown hair framed a face still pale, but no longer frozen with fear. Rachel's nurse stood behind her, but didn't stop her from entering. Lily approached the bed slowly. "You're awake," she said, voice small but steady. Ethan smiled faintly. "Thanks to you and him." She looked at Valor and reached out her small hand. The German shepherd raised his head and sniffed her fingers, then gently rested his chin on her lap. A tiny smile broke through the child's solemn expression. "He's warm," she whispered. "Warmer than most people I know," Ethan replied softly. Lily's nurse, Marjorie Dale, a woman in her late 50s with soft eyes and graying curls, spoke quietly. "She's been humming that tune ever since she woke up. Says it helps her not be afraid." When they left, Ethan turned his attention back to the frozen frame on the laptop screen. The silver lightning bolt stared back at him like a ghost. Night fell early in the mountains. Rachel didn't return until late. Her eyes were shadowed when she did. She closed the door behind her and sat down heavily. The sheriff was less than helpful. He dismissed the video, said the badge reflection could have come from anything. Ethan narrowed his gaze. "He said that?" "Yes, and he asked me to delete the footage." Valor lifted his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest, as if he understood every word. Rachel leaned forward, lowering her voice. "There's more. Maintenance found fresh tire tracks out past the North Road, Sector 13, the same direction that Badge was facing in the footage." Ethan's pulse quickened. "The North Road's off limits. No patrols there in months." "That's what makes it interesting," Rachel said. "Someone's been using it anyway." She looked toward the window, where the thawing snow dripped in slow rhythm. "The ice is melting, Ethan. And whatever's underneath, it's ugly." He met her gaze, weary but resolute. "Then we dig." Rachel nodded. Outside, the night deepened into a quiet so heavy it felt alive. In the parking lot below, the snowmelt reflected the yellow glow of the hospital lights. But in that reflection, a shadow moved, a tall figure standing beside a parked cruiser, face hidden, watching the hospital windows. Inside, Valor rose abruptly, ears pricking toward the glass. His body stiffened, muscles tense. Ethan followed his gaze, but saw only darkness beyond the melting frost. The dog's growl faded into silence, yet the tension lingered in the air like a warning. Somewhere beyond the thawing world, secrets were beginning to stir. The snow had begun to melt on the streets of Aspen Ridge, but the air inside the police station was colder than ever. When Ethan Cole stepped through its glass doors, a hush fell over the room. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, and glances shifted just long enough to suggest suspicion before darting away. He could feel it, the invisible distance that grows when loyalty begins to crack. Sheriff Dalton Price was waiting near the front desk. His towering frame filled the hallway, his uniform pressed to perfection, his silver hair slicked back beneath his dark fedora. He smiled as Ethan approached, but it was a smile carved from ice. "Cole," he said, extending a hand. "Good to have you back on your feet. Hell of an ordeal you went through." Ethan accepted the handshake, his grip firm, but his eyes unreadable. "I'm just glad the girl made it." Dalton's lips twitched. "Of course. Tragic business. Best thing for you now would be to take some leave, clear your head. No need to dig into old ghosts." "I'll rest when I know who left me in the snow," Ethan said quietly. For a moment the sheriff's eyes hardened, a flicker, gone as quickly as it appeared. "Careful, son," he said, voice low. "The mountain doesn't like those who start avalanches." Then he turned, coat sweeping behind him, and disappeared into his office. Rachel Vance was waiting by the evidence room, arms crossed. Her dark uniform was dusted with melted snow, her braid slightly loosened. "He's nervous," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can hear it in the way he talks." Ethan nodded. "And he wants me gone before I can ask the wrong question." Before Rachel could respond, a familiar bark echoed down the hall. Valor trotted in, tail low, but eyes sharp. The German shepherd paused near the door, nose twitching as if catching a scent that didn't belong. Rachel crouched, running her hand over his collar. "You sense it too, huh, boy?" Valor let out a low growl. That night, the storm returned. By evening, the wind howled through the valley again, shaking the shutters of the police station. At 8:43 p.m., the power went out. The hum of lights died. The building fell into black silence, punctuated only by the creak of settling beams. Rachel grabbed a flashlight, its beam cutting through the dark. "Generators in the basement," she said. "Come on." Ethan followed, his breath fogging in the sudden chill. Valor padded ahead, moving with uncanny certainty, as if he already knew the way. The stairwell groaned beneath their boots. At the bottom, the flashlight revealed concrete walls covered in frost. Then Rachel froze. Her light caught something on the wall, a line of words scrawled in black charcoal. "No one is safe." The letters dripped as though written in haste or fear. "Who the hell wrote that?" Ethan muttered. Before Rachel could answer, a faint metallic sound echoed from deeper in. The basement, a door creaking open. Valor tensed, his ears pricking up, and then he moved, silent but sure, toward the far end of the corridor. Ethan unholstered his weapon. "Stay behind me." The beam of the flashlight flickered as they approached the storage room. The heavy steel door stood ajar. Ethan pushed it open slowly, and the sight inside stopped them both. There, sitting on the floor against a wall, was Lily Evans. The little girl's wrists were bound with duct tape, her small frame shivering violently. Her mouth was sealed, eyes wide with terror. Rachel rushed forward, ripping the tape away and gathering her into her arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now," she whispered. Lily gasped for air, trembling. "They came back," she stammered, voice barely audible. "They said no one would believe me. One of them had a badge, like the sheriff's." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Did you see his face?" She shook her head. "He wore a mask, but I saw the silver bolt." Rachel exchanged a glance with Ethan, the same symbol from the footage. "We need to get her out of here," Rachel said. But before they could move, Valor barked, loud, sharp, urgent. A red light flickered down the hallway, flashing like a warning. Then came the sound of boots on concrete. "Upstairs," Ethan hissed. He grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her toward the stairs. Rachel covered their retreat, gun raised. The red light strobed faster, reflecting off the metal railing like blood. They were halfway up when a deafening crash split the air, glass shattering from the main lobby above. A gust of icy wind tore through the station, scattering papers and howling like a scream. "Someone's inside!" Rachel shouted. Ethan pushed Lily behind a filing cabinet. "Stay down, no matter what happens." He turned to Rachel. "We find them." They crept through the darkened corridors, flashlights off, moving only by the faint glow of emergency lights. Valor led, his body low, nose twitching. The silence was so thick it hurt to breathe. At the end of the hall, near the entrance, a shadow moved. A tall figure in a heavy coat was crouched by the evidence locker, holding something metallic, a flare gun, glowing faintly red. "Police!" Ethan shouted. The man turned, and for an instant the flare illuminated his face beneath a black ski mask. Young, sharp features, eyes like ice. He fired the flare into the air. Red light exploded across the room, painting the snowstorm outside in crimson. Valor lunged. The man swung wildly, knocking over a chair, but the dog's jaws caught his arm, dragging him to the floor. Ethan rushed forward, disarming him, Rachel covering with her pistol. "Who sent you?" Ethan barked. The masked man spat blood, smirking. "You think this ends with me?" he hissed. "You're chasing ghosts, Cole. The mountain has its own law." Before Ethan could respond, another sound erupted. The roar of an engine outside. Headlights cut through the blizzard. A second vehicle slammed into the front steps, its doors flying open. Rachel turned, but too late. A shot rang out. The masked intruder's shoulder jerked as the bullet tore through him from outside. He collapsed instantly. Through the swirling snow at the doorway, Sheriff Dalton appeared, coat whipping in the wind, pistol raised. "Stand down!" he commanded. Ethan stared, heart hammering. "You shot him?" Dalton holstered his weapon, face calm. "He was reaching for something." "You're welcome." Rachel's voice was sharp. "How did you even know we were here?" Dalton smiled faintly. "Small town. I hear everything." He knelt beside the dead man, checking his jacket pocket. Inside was a key ring, identical to the one seen in the video. Dalton turned it over slowly. Looks like your ghost had hardware from the old K9 unit. Could be an ex-officer gone rogue. Ethan stepped forward. Or someone who didn't go rogue at all, someone following orders. Dalton's smile faded. Watch your tone, Cole. You're walking thin ice. Valor growled, low and menacing. Dalton's eyes flicked to the dog, then to the emblem on the wall, the lightning bolt reflected in red from the flare's dying glow. Get that girl home, he said coldly. This is over. But Ethan knew it wasn't. As they escorted Lily outside, the snow began falling again, heavier, faster, as if the mountain wanted to bury the night. The lights of the station flickered back on just as Ethan looked over his shoulder. There, half buried in snow near the entrance, something glimmered, a police badge, its number scratched out, the lightning emblem barely visible beneath the frost. He picked it up, cold seeping into his palm. Rachel met his eyes. Neither spoke. Behind them, Valor stared into the woods, tail rigid, every instinct alive. Somewhere beyond the pines, a faint echo of footsteps retreated into the storm. And then the sharp crack of a gunshot echoed through the valley. Distant, but real. Valor bolted into the night, his form swallowed by snow. Ethan and Rachel followed, their flashlights carving through the darkness. In the whiteout, the only thing visible was a red reflection flickering against the badge still in Ethan's hand. The reflection of lightning. The night swallowed the mountains whole. Snow drifted in wide, violent spirals across the highway as Rachel's truck crawled through the storm, its headlights slicing the darkness like two trembling spears of gold. The wipers squealed uselessly against the blizzard. The road ahead was nothing but an endless white void. Ethan gripped the dashboard, his breath fogging the glass, his body tense with the kind of focus that soldiers never unlearn. Behind them, Valor sat upright in the back seat, the German shepherd's chest rising and falling with quiet power. Every so often he gave a low whine, his golden eyes locked on the north, as if he could see what the storm tried to hide. Rachel tightened her hands on the steering wheel. "You sure about this lead?" she asked over the roar of the wind. Her face was pale, framed by strands of hair that had escaped her braid. She hadn't slept since the attack at the station. Her voice, though steady, carried the brittle edge of exhaustion. Ethan nodded. Dalton's vehicle tracker pinged near Black Pine Ridge about an hour ago. That's where the old forestry cabin is, the one that was decommissioned 10 years ago. Rachel glanced at him. "You think he took Lily there?" "I don't think," Ethan said grimly. "I know." Outside, the snow thickened, swirling like ghosts in the headlights. Valor's ears twitched, and he gave a sharp bark, pressing a paw against the back seat window. Rachel followed his gaze. Through the white haze, faint and flickering, a distant light blinked deep within the forest. Ethan's pulse quickened. There. He's there. They turned off the main road, tires crunching over frozen gravel, and began climbing the narrow trail that wound through the pines. The storm howled louder, pushing against the truck as though the mountain itself wanted them to turn back. Branches cracked beneath the tires, and the world became a blur of snow and shadow. After what felt like an eternity, the cabin came into view, a dark silhouette against the glowing wall of white. One of the windows pulsed with dim orange light. The truck skidded to a stop. Ethan checked his sidearm, breath steady. Rachel loaded her rifle, eyes cold with determination. "We go together," she said. "Always," Ethan replied. The moment they opened the doors, the wind slammed into them like a living thing. Snow lashed their faces as they trudged toward the cabin, Valor leading, nose to the ground, body taut as a drawn bowstring. The cabin door hung open, banging lightly in the wind. The smell of kerosene and damp wood filled the air. Inside, a lantern flickered weakly on the floor, its flame sputtering near a puddle of spilled oil. And there, bound to a chair, a strip of duct tape across her mouth, was Lily Evans. Her wide blue eyes shimmered with tears. "Lily!" Rachel rushed forward, pulling the tape free. The girl gasped, trembling. "He's still here," she whispered. Ethan turned, raising his gun just as a voice cut through the storm behind them. Cold, controlled, and heavy with betrayal. "You should have stayed buried, Cole." Sheriff Dalton Price stepped into the doorway, his dark coat whipping in the wind, pistol raised. Snow clung to his shoulders, melting against the heat of the lantern's glow. His expression was one of weariness rather than rage, as if the act of killing were not a crime but a duty. Ethan's voice was low. "Why, Dalton? Why the girl? Why any of it?" Dalton's eyes glinted. "Because she saw what she shouldn't have. And you stumbled into something you'll never understand. You think this is about greed? It's bigger than me, bigger than you. There are people who'd burn this whole forest before they let the truth out." Rachel aimed her rifle. "Then let's start with your truth." Dalton's lip curled. "You won't shoot me, Vance. You still believe in the badge." He turned his pistol toward Ethan. "But I don't." Before he could fire, Valor moved, a blur of black and gold, muscles coiled with instinct. The German shepherd lunged, his body crashing into Dalton with a snarl that split the storm. The gun went off, deafening in the small space. The lantern shattered, spilling fire across the floorboards. "Valor!" Ethan shouted, diving forward. Dalton roared, struggling as Valor's jaws locked around his arm. The gun clattered to the floor. Rachel sprinted forward, kicked the weapon aside, and tackled Dalton from behind. They hit the ground hard, the floor cracking beneath the impact. "Don't move," Rachel hissed, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. The flame spread fast, licking up the walls, feeding on dry timber. Smoke filled the cabin in seconds. Ethan ripped through the ropes binding Lily and scooped her into his arms. "We have to move, now." Rachel dragged Dalton to his feet, coughing. The sheriff sneered through the haze. "You think this ends here? You don't even know who's holding the match." They burst into the snow just as the cabin's roof caved in with a roar. Fire exploded into the night, orange against the white fury of the storm. Ethan laid Lily down on the frozen ground and checked her pulse. She clung to him, shivering but alive. Valor stood nearby, chest heaving, his fur streaked with ash. Rachel forced Dalton to his knees, pressing his face into the snow. "You'll rot for this," she said. Dalton laughed, a low, bitter sound. "You still don't get it. I'm not the villain here. I'm the cleanup." Ethan stepped forward. "Then who are you cleaning up for?" Dalton didn't answer. Instead, his eyes darted toward the tree line. "You're late," he muttered. Both officers turned sharply. From the shadows beyond the flames, a second figure emerged, tall, wrapped in a heavy black parka with a silver badge pinned to the chest. The badge gleamed in the flickering firelight, the insignia of a federal tactical division, something neither of them had seen in years. The newcomer stopped a few paces away, his gloved hands empty, his voice calm. "Agent Marcus Hale, Federal Bureau of Security Affairs." Rachel raised her rifle. "You're a little far from D.C., Agent." Hale's face was hidden beneath the hood, but when he spoke again, his tone was clipped, professional. "Lower your weapons. You're interfering with a classified operation." Ethan stepped in front of Lily. "Classified operation? You mean kidnapping a child and leaving officers for dead?" Hale's gaze flicked to Dalton, still kneeling in the snow. The sheriff was a liability. He was supposed to contain this, not make a spectacle. Dalton snarled, "You used me." Hale ignored him. "You stumbled onto something buried, Officer Cole. An unauthorized network of land transfers hidden under federal contracts. Money. Power. And the girl? Her family owned part of the land they wanted. They needed her gone." Rachel's grip tightened on her weapon. "So now what? You kill us too?" Hale's voice remained calm. "No. You go home. Forget this ever happened." Ethan met his gaze, unflinching. "That's not going to happen." The wind howled again, scattering ash and snow across the clearing. Valor stepped forward, teeth bared. For the first time, Hale's mask of composure cracked. He took a step back. "Don't be foolish," he warned. "This isn't your fight." Ethan raised his weapon. "It is now." Hale's hand twitched toward his coat, and then Valor lunged again, snarling, knocking him off balance. The agent fell backward into the snow, his badge clattering beside him. For a split second, his coat opened, revealing a row of suppressed rounds and a satellite transmitter blinking red. Rachel grabbed Lily, dragging her behind the truck. Ethan aimed at the transmitter and fired. The device sparked, hissed, and died. Hale cursed, scrambling to his feet, but by the time he raised his weapon, Valor stood between them, motionless, teeth bared, daring him to move. For a heartbeat, time froze. Then Hale smiled thinly. "You've just declared war on people who don't lose." He vanished into the storm, his footsteps erased by wind and snow before they could follow. Ethan turned back to Rachel, his breath ragged. Dalton was gone, his cuffs broken, tracks leading into the trees. Flames from the collapsing cabin painted the horizon red. Rachel whispered, "He's still out there." Ethan nodded grimly. "So is the truth." Valor growled softly, the scar over his eye catching the light as snow swirled around them. Above the roar of the storm, a faint mechanical hum began echoing through the valley, the sound of helicopters approaching from the north. The hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. The blizzards that once buried Aspen Ridge were gone. Spring had crept in quietly, almost shyly, melting the jagged white walls that had guarded the mountain through winter. The rivers ran again, laughing over stone, and for the first time in months, sunlight spilled over the valley like forgiveness. But beneath that calm beauty, the town was still reeling from what it had learned. Sheriff Dalton Price was no longer the man at the station's helm. He sat now behind bars in Helena, his face gaunt, his once proud posture bent by the weight of exposure. The man who had spoken of duty and order had been the very architect of betrayal. When federal agents stormed the investigation offices weeks later, they found everything: the coded files, the satellite coordinates, The documents linking him to illegal logging routes and smuggled weapons buried under the guise of wildlife reserve maintenance. But Dalton was only one piece of the rot. Names emerged: judges, businessmen, even retired officers, all tied to a network that reached far beyond Montana's frozen borders. The man known as Agent Marcus Hale, the one who had appeared in the firelight and vanished into the storm, had gone underground before anyone could question him. The official report simply said, "Federal operative missing in action." The case was sealed under federal authority within 72 hours. For Ethan Cole, it was supposed to be closure. Instead, it felt like a half-written confession. He stood at the small memorial erected outside the burned-out cabin in Black Pine Ridge. A cross made of old timber leaned under the thawing snow. Valor sat beside him, the dog's fur brushed by the breeze, Scar gleaming faintly in the morning light. Rachel Vance arrived quietly, her boots crunching through the slush. She had changed. Her hair was shorter now, her uniform jacket replaced by a simple flannel shirt, sleeves rolled. Yet her posture remained that of a protector, steady and ready. "They're saying you're a hero," she said softly. Ethan chuckled without humor. "They're saying a lot of things." He handed her an envelope, the commendation letter, and the medal that had come with it. "They can keep this. I didn't earn it." Rachel looked at him with the kind of understanding only someone who had walked through the same fire could give. "You faced death, Cole. You saved a child." Ethan shook his head. No, he did. He glanced at Valor, who met his eyes with quiet loyalty. If it weren't for him, Lily and I would be buried under that snow. Heroes don't always wear badges or carry guns. Sometimes they just listen when no one else can. Rachel smiled faintly. He's one of a kind. In the weeks that followed, life in Aspen Ridge began to mend itself. The station was rebuilt, the staff reorganized, and for the first time in years, Rachel allowed herself something she'd long forgotten: peace. She adopted Lily Evans, giving the little girl the home she had lost. Their small cabin by Silver Pine Creek became a haven of warmth, wooden floors, soft curtains, and a porch where wildflowers dared to bloom again. Lily, now more talkative than before, filled the house with laughter and music. She had found a passion for sketching, mostly of mountains, birds, and one recurring subject: a black and tan dog with kind eyes. Rachel hung one of those drawings above the fireplace. Ethan didn't stay long in town. The mountains still called to him, the silence still had lessons left to teach. With Valor at his side, he founded the Echo K-9 Unit, a small independent task force that patrolled the high passes, rescued lost hikers, and kept watch over the border trails where the law often failed to reach. Word of their work spread across the state. Stories whispered in diners and truck stops about the man and his dog who appear out of the fog. It was not fame Ethan sought, only purpose. The wilderness gave him that, a rhythm of service without applause. And Valor, as always, walked beside him like a shadow stitched from faith. One morning, near the end of winter's last breath, Ethan drove down to Rachel's cabin. The air smelled of thawing earth and cedar smoke. Lily was in the yard, chasing a wooden toy airplane that she had painted herself. Her laughter rang like bells. When she saw the patrol truck, she ran toward it, arms open. "Officer Ethan!" she cried, grinning wide. Ethan knelt to meet her hug, smiling for the first time in days. "You've grown," he said. Rachel stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her jeans. "She's been eating like she's training for a marathon," she joked. "Can't blame her," Ethan said. "The world looks a lot brighter from here." Valor hopped out of the truck, tail wagging. Lily dropped to her knees and threw her arms around his neck. "You came back," she said breathlessly. The big dog licked her cheek, and she giggled. "I drew you, you know. You're hanging above the fireplace." Rachel crossed her arms, smiling. "She's right. You're a celebrity now, Valor." Ethan chuckled. "Don't tell him that. He already has an ego." They shared a quiet moment watching Lily and the dog play in the melting snow. The sunlight turned everything gold, the trees, the ice, even the scars that used to define them. Lily stopped suddenly, pressing her cheek against Valor's fur. "You heard me that night, didn't you?" she whispered. "When I sang, you came because you heard me." Valor didn't move. He only tilted his head slightly, then let out a single soft bark, as if to say yes. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. There were things words could never express, truths that lived only in the space between a heartbeat and a breath, the kind shared by a man and a creature who had both seen too much and survived anyway. Later, as the sun began to dip behind the ridges, Ethan and Rachel stood by the fence line watching the horizon. "What will you do now?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "Keep patrolling. There's always someone lost out there. Maybe I can make sure they're found." Rachel smiled. "You could stay, teach at the academy. We could use someone who knows the mountain like you do." He looked toward the peaks, their tips catching the last light. "Maybe someday," he said, "but not yet. Not while there's still shadows out there." Rachel nodded, understanding. She'd seen that look before, the look of someone who belonged to the wild more than to walls. As they parted, Lily waved from the porch, Valor beside her, both framed by the amber glow of dusk. Snowmelt ran down the dirt path like veins of silver, carrying the last of winter away. Ethan turned one last time. "Take care of her," he called. Rachel smiled. "We'll take care of each other." The truck rolled away down the winding road, tires splashing through puddles of reflected light. Valor's bark echoed once, faint and proud, before fading into the still air. That evening, when the sun finally dipped and the chill returned, Lily stood by the window, looking toward the mountains. She whispered softly, "Good night, Valor," as if her words could travel on the wind. Outside, the snow had almost vanished. The forest exhaled steam like a living creature reborn. The world felt new. And in that quiet, as the stars blinked awake, a voice, the narrator's, seemed to drift across the valley. Among frozen forests and silent peaks, miracles don't always fall from heaven. Sometimes they walk beside us on four loyal legs, carrying the warmth of a heart that never leaves, even when the storm is gone. In the quiet of the mountains after the storms have passed, one truth remains clear. Miracles don't always come with thunder or wings. Sometimes they come softly through the loyalty of a creature who listens when no one else can, or through the courage of a heart that refuses to give up even in the coldest night. Maybe that's how God works, not through grand signs or flashing lights, but through the small moments that remind us we are never alone. Through a loyal dog who runs into the storm, through a child's voice that refuses to fade, through the simple act of love that changes everything. So if you believe that miracles still happen, if you believe that faith, loyalty, and kindness can still light the darkest winter, type Amen in the comments below. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because together we can keep sharing these stories that remind the world that God's light still shines, even through the snow. May the Lord bless you, protect you, and fill your heart with peace wherever your journey leads.